Good morning, my friends. Mike's MMA Picks here with your Fight Morning Quick Card Breakdown show for UFC Vegas 73, where we have Mackenzie Dern taking on Angela Hill inside of the friendly confines of the UFC Apex. Small octagon, I believe, is going to be in play here early and often. Fighters will be having less room to evade, and that should force action. It should test gas tanks and potentially test chins and also test the submission defense of a number of fighters on this card. So let's get things kicked off with the first bout of the evening, where we have Takashi Sato taking on Temba Garimbo. Garimbo took a loss last time out, I believe a submission loss against AJ Fletcher. We were on AJ Fletcher last time out against Garimbo. Garimbo coming in as the minus 125 betting favorite. The odds here are courtesy of DraftKings, and they are, as of a couple of hours ago, I updated these graphics. Sato, primarily a striker who's been on the losing end of his last few fights. One of the challenges for Sato is he doesn't necessarily have the pace that he can push deep into fights. And Garimbo has been a bit of a mixed bag on the regional scene. You've seen some grappling, some wrestling, but he typically has a significant reach advantage in many of his fights. The question is he going to stand and try to trade with Sato here? I see this fight heading all over the place, and I'll be picking Garimbo at minus 125. I have not made a play on this fight, but at this stage in the game, I know both of these fighters are in their early 30s. I believe they're both 32 years of age. They are not necessarily finished products, though. Sato, we have an idea of what he is and what he will bring to the table here. Garimbo is going to be the pick. I think that he has the octagon jitters out of the way, and his second performance, he will walk away with the victory. Now, I must also mention that this specific card, you look up and down the fights here, there are no convincing plays where you have a fighter who doesn't have any warts. Almost all of these fighters on this card have some glaring hole in their game. And Sato, obviously, his ground game is his kryptonite here. Now, can Garimbo pose a serious threat? We saw him cause problems for AJ Fletcher, actually, on the mat early in their bout. So give me Garimbo in that spot. Next up, where we have a massive favorite, Natalia Silva, coming in as the minus 900 betting favorite, taking on Victoria Leonardo, who has seen better days. She's been caught a number of times by strikes. I believe she broke a bone in her arm at one point during a fight in her UFC career. And Silva, in this spot, I'm not a big fan of laying massive juice, especially in women's mixed martial arts. These are times when we've seen time and time again where a change in camp, a change in time of the month, etc. It wreaks havoc on a lot of fighters throughout the course of their careers. And if I was to make a play on this specific bout, it would be Silva inside the distance. But I'm not touching this fight. I think that if you are playing DraftKings, be aware that Natalia Silva is extremely highly priced. But in this spot, I'll be picking Silva to win inside the distance. Leonardo, man, she drew a tough assignment here. Let's put it that way. And the other thing was Natalia Silva, you watch the weigh-ins, looked phenomenal on the scales. And if and when she's able to burn through the carcass of Victoria Leonardo, who's next for Natalia Silva? That's the question, the burning question that folks want to know. Let's take a look at the comments section here. Good morning, Professor Chaos. Great to see you in the chat. Good morning, 420. Appreciate you, Evan. We've got a big day, and I'm excited to chat about the the fight that we have pending upon us in the near future here. Specifically, Chase Hooper taking on Nick Fiore. Liam, by the way, great to have you on board here this morning on this late fight morning. Chase Hooper coming in as the underdog, plus 110, taking on Nick Fiore. Now, Chase Hooper, who is moving up a weight class here, and you watch his fights down at 145 pounds, and he was one of the most physically weak fighters we've seen perform inside of the octagon. The noodly frame, relying on his scrambling ability to reverse positions and take backs. But you watch the way Hooper performs on the feet. You watch the punching bag that he's been throughout the entirety of his UFC career. He's been going life and death with many, many low-level UFC fighters. Steven Peterson had his way with Chase Hooper. We've seen Alex Caceres manhandle Chase Hooper. You've seen other fighters up and down. Felipe Colares, rest in peace. Felipe Colares was really in a drag him out war with Chase Hooper, and now Nick Fiore, who has a grappling prowess, has shown against Rebecca, was able to hang in that fight, go the distance with a really tough opponent. And I'll be honest, at this stage in the career of Chase Hooper, you have to wonder, is the confidence beaten out of this young man? At some point, it has to be. And is it going to rear its ugly head? We saw Hooper, his head bouncing around like a Pez dispenser all over the octagon last time out against Steve Garcia. I know that Nick Fiore doesn't have the striking acumen of Steve Garcia, but let's be honest here. I'm not going out of my way to force any action on this card. I have no plays listed on my Bet MMA profile today for this event. And I've been sitting on the sidelines watching these lines move, watching lines marinate. And I have concerns if folks are risking a significant percentage of their bankroll on Chase Hooper as he moves up a weight class here. Nick Fiore is a tough kid. I know we also have been defecating on Nick Fiore's resume, and you have to wonder what these fighters, what their concerns are when they sign these contracts. They're offered fights, right? And they're at the mercy of whoever the opponent is in front of them. So if they're banking wins, don't hate on that. You know, you look at Sean O'Malley and others. There have been fighters who've been building their resumes off of poor competition throughout the years. And Nick Fiore may be one of those fighters, but I don't think it's going to take much to beat Chase Hooper at lightweight. And Nick Fiore may be the guy. He may not be the guy, but I'm going to be picking Nick Fiore here. And I do not trust Chase Hooper at all. He has a scrambling ability to speak of, and we know the grappling is his strength, but also Nick Fiore has a strength of grappling to his own name. And this is a very closely lined fight. I think you'd be better served keeping the money in the pocket and not risking it in such a volatile fight against with showcasing a fighter in Chase Hooper who still has a lot of room to grow. 23 years of age, Nick Fiore, 25 years of age. I know these fighters aren't necessarily finished products, but Chase Hooper's been through the meat grinder, my friends. He's been beaten to a bloody pulp multiple times, and he may walk away with a submission victory here. He may end up winning this fight. I'm not going to be picking him, and I am sure as hell not putting my money behind him in this spot. So give me Nick Fiore, but no action on this fight, and I'll be I'll be resting comfortably on the couch watching these two young men battle inside of the octagon. Next fight, Ilir Latifi, who looks legitimately like a fire hydrant, taking on Rodrigo Nascimento. Nascimento coming in as the minus 175 betting favorite. You watch Latifi out there. This is a fighter who I was under the impression that he had retired in his last bout. He complained about, I believe, a staph infection at one point when he left the octagon, was under some sort of suspension after that bout. And now he's back against Nascimento, who has a grappling game, a submission game to his name. He has many more submissions than he does knockouts. And we saw against Bado, who, as one of the lower level heavyweights in the UFC, was able to pump a jab out there and keep his opponent at range. I am concerned for Latifi in regards to his gas tank. And also, he's at a massive, massive reach disadvantage here. So if Latifi is able to somehow get inside on Nascimento and land takedowns and keep him on the mat, that's a path to victory there. But I'm going to be picking Nascimento here. I am not playing him at minus 175, and I don't see this fight going all 3 rounds inside of the octagon. This is a situation where there's a massive age discrepancy as well. And when a fighter has retired and then come back, then that is cause for concern. So give me Rodrigo Nascimento in there. Next up, let's see. Oh, we've got more comments here. Douglas, good morning. Great to see you in here. Mandy Bohm, next. Okay, I'm down with that. All business today. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Evan, appreciate that. We have to be able to be honest with ourselves, and that's it. I've never been one to speak in certainties. By the way, beware of folks who don't take into account both sides of every fight, or pop their mouths off and speak in certainties as if they are God's gift to the MMA betting community. You have to be honest with yourselves, realize that there are no certainties in this game. We deal with implied probability and percentages. And I think delusions of grandeur are a problem in the industry. Folks go on hot streaks. They think they're the best. And this game can humble you real quick. So proceed with caution, pick your spots, and get after it. By the way, let's continue our journey, my brothers, where we have Orion Cosi taking on Gilbert Urbina. Gilbert Urbina, minus 110. And on the other side of the fight, you also have Orion Cosi. Both of these fighters have shown themselves to be a threat in certain areas of the fight. Urbina on the feet, Cosi on the mat. Cosi, I was listening to pre-fight interviews where he spoke about I believe it was a COVID vaccine that potentially caused him some issues, and he is looking to right the ship here, headed in to this matchup after going the distance and being pushed extremely hard by none other than the almighty Blood Diamond. Orion Cosi, man, that was a bad look in that fight. And Gilbert Urbina has met some adversity in his previous matchups. In this spot, I'm going to be going with the fighter who is more savvy when it comes to the grappling aspect of the octagon. And Orion Cosi is going to be my pick here. I will be picking Orion Cosi. I believe that the smaller octagon is going to help him out here, and that he's going to be able to close distance, push a pace, and drain Gilbert Urbina, who is going to likely have trouble getting back to the feet. So give me Orion Cosi here. He's going to have to mind his P's and Q's closing the distance. That's one thing that we really need to mention that a few times up and down this card, especially with this fight. Then you also have to look at the Mackenzie Dern Angela Hill fight. If Mackenzie Dern is able to close the distance, then it could be all she wrote. And then you also have another fight on this card where we have Diego Ferreira. And in that matchup against Michael Johnson, that is going to be a spot where you have Carlos Diego Ferreira attempting to close distance in a intelligent manner against Michael Johnson. That's going to be a challenging feat. So Orion Cosi is going to have to close this distance, get inside on Urbina, land takedowns, and really put it on Urbina. I have no action on this fight, but that will be the pick. Orion Cosi. Next up, where we have Karolina Kovalevich taking on Vanessa Demopolis. Demopolis coming in as the plus 110 underdog, taking on Karolina Kovalevich, who is a seasoned veteran of the game, a fighter who has put in her time facing legitimate competition up and down her career. Now, it's got to be mentioned that Karolina Kovalevich, at one point, just a couple of years ago, had lost 7 of 9 bouts. And now she's 37 years of age. So has that fire, the embers of that fire been put out, or are they still burning? It seemed like they were still burning. If you watch the past couple of fights, she had a couple of situations where she could have potentially given up on herself, and she opted not to do so. She hung in there. Demopolis comes out like a lady on fire, and she is going to be looking to ground Kovalevich and lock up a submission here, or try to ride this fight out via top time. I have concerns on multiple sides of this fight. Kovalevich, how much does she have left in the tank? Obviously, she has a massive striking advantage here. She also has a reach advantage in this specific matchup. And Vanessa Demopolis has a submission threat at all times. I'll be picking Karolina Kovalevich here. And, it's just a matter of how she gets this done. I don't think she necessarily has the power to put out Demopolis, but she could potentially capitalize on a bonehead error by Vanessa Demopolis. That's not something that I would put past Demopolis. She comes out like a ball of fire and has a tendency to make some mistakes inside of the octagon. And the other thing is Demopolis is no spring chicken either. She's in her mid-30s. So Kovalevich is going to be the pick. Next up, we have Emily Ducote taking on Lupita Godinez. Lupita Godinez coming in as the minus 150 betting favorite, and Ducote is sitting at plus 130. Ducote had a full camp for this matchup. It's a camp that she's coming off of a humiliating loss at the hands and the feet of Angela Hill in a larger octagon. Now, this is going to take place in the smaller octagon. Godinez is riding the heels of a controversial win over Cynthia Calvillo. Cynthia Calvillo looked like she was getting the better of Godinez in many of the exchanges, and the physicality of Godinez wasn't necessarily up to snuff. So in my opinion here, Godinez is going to have to use her physicality to push a pace, and that could potentially come at a cost here, because I know she hasn't put in a full camp, but this is a fighter who also has not necessarily learned from her mistakes and taken short notice fights in the past and taken losses too. She fought Angela Hill, and I believe she in Godinez suffered an injury. If I am not mistaken, I listened to an interview with Godinez where she mentioned I believe it was a hip injury that she had coming off of the Carnelossi fight and prior to the Angela Hill matchup. So that's why she wasn't necessarily landing takedowns there. Now, Ducote, I know we've seen her. I was at her fight against Jessica Penne, and she was kicking the front leg of Jessica Penne early and often. And we saw that she possesses legitimate, crisp striking at times. Against Angela Hill, though, she wasn't able to find the target. And on the regional scene, she's shown a bit of a mixed bag. She can perform on the mat. Godinez, the smaller fighter here, but she's thick. Godinez is the thicker fighter, especially from the waist down. And you have to wonder how much that humiliating loss for Emily Ducote affects her headed into this matchup against Godinez. Godinez better get right in her face and force the action. That's where Godinez tends to shine in firefights. And Ducote could be finding the target early and often because she is the more crisp, more accurate striker. And I'll be picking Godinez, though. Think that Godinez, I know this is a short notice fight again, and her fight IQ has been suspect, but the physicality is going to be the difference maker in my professional opinion here. And I'll be picking Lupita Godinez to walk away with the victory. Let's see. We've got a few more comments here. Yes, Godinez is extremely thick. Let's see. Let's continue the journey, my brothers, where we have Maheshate taking on Vyacheslav Borschev. Borschev coming in as the minus 170 betting favorite. This line has widened. Maheshate plus 145. Maheshate is the much younger fighter here. I know Borshev's only 31 years of age, but when you watch the willingness of Borschev to enter the pocket, he gets clipped in many of his fights, gets caught. And we saw against Diakese, I believe I was on Diakese when he fought Borschev. Borschev had no answer whatsoever for the grappling. And Maheshate is not necessarily a grappler, so we, to some extent, can put that on the back burner. But one thing I will say is at only 23, or I believe Maheshate's, let's see. Yes, 23 years of age for Maheshate. Maheshate is a fighter who's growing fight by fight against Rafa Garcia. I thought he was going to end up leaving the weight class. He missed weight last time out and is extremely large for this weight class. He's a fighter who throws straight strikes down the pipe and is tough as nails. And he will take one to give one. And Borschev may be better at cutting off angles here and has a killer instinct, but I also am not counting out Maheshate in this fight. I think this kid is a legitimate force, and you better get at him and take him out now before he starts to grow and his skill set begins to his potential. He starts to reach his potential. You watch Ian Gary and others, there are certain fighters where if they show glaring holes in previous matchups, sometimes those holes can be shored up as they enter the next bout. And I believe that that's going to be happening here for Maheshate. I'm going to be picking Maheshate to score an upset victory here against Borschev. Borschev, his striking's pretty. It's beautiful to watch. But also, he leaves himself open. And look at Maheshate, the way he waits on his strikes. He waits for his opponents to go, and he will fire back these counters that are a real threat. I also wouldn't discount a knee up the middle for Maheshate. But give me Maheshate to score the upset victory in this spot. Next up, where we have Andre Fialho taking on Joaquin Buckley. Buckley coming back down to 170 pounds. Buckley looked phenomenal on the scales. He's coming off the loss to Chris Curtis, and he was up at 185 pounds where he shouldn't have been. I know he's carrying a lot of weight in the pectoralis major area. And Fialho is a fighter who only 29 years of age. You would think he'd be a lot older. This is a fighter who has taken a lot of damage, and Fialho hasn't changed his approach to fighting. He comes out, wants to get in your face, and wants to exchange. And he has a stylistic approach that lends itself to finishes. You look, I believe he's had 4 consecutive fights that he's been involved with that have ended via finish. This fight isn't expected to go to a decision at minus 250. And I believe this is a volatile matchup. Buckley, the Impa Kasangane matchup is something that shows me that he is willing to attempt explosive strikes, high risk strikes, and low percentage, high risk. He will do that. And I think this fight, you watched the way this was the iciest of the face-offs. I believe there was an exchange where Buckley said that he asked Fialho if he had anything to say, and he said nothing. And then Buckley mentioned that he was going to knock Paulo out. So I am going to pick Buckley here, but hesitantly, because that Kill Cliff fight camp is a force to be reckoned with. And also, Fialho looked phenomenal on the scales this time around. I believe that this is going to end via knockout, probably, I would say, in the first or second round. I've been looking at the under 2.5 here. I have no action on this fight, but that is something I've been keeping an eye on. By the way, 9 out of 12 matchups on this card are favored to end inside the distance. And this would be one of them. Let's see. We've got some more comments here in the Liam. Great to have you on board. Maha versus Slava is a super fun fight. High variance. Yes, I believe it. I believe it will be. Should be able to fold Maha with body work. His skinny bean. All right, let's see. Yep. So Buckley is going to be the pick, and I believe that he gets this fight done inside the distance, but I would be more apt to play fight doesn't go the distance. I believe that although it is juiced, that I believe has a high percentage of cashing. Now, this is my personal most anticipated bout of the evening. I know that some folks are looking at the Chase Hooper Nick Fiore fight as their main event, but this is mine. Michael Johnson has looked great in recent fights from a striking standpoint. Still, the way he moves around in the octagon, I have concerns. This is a veteran of the game, someone who has put their body through it, man. He has taken some serious punishment through the years. And also, Michael Johnson, 9 losses via submission. That is something that we need to focus on. You don't see that every day. And I know it's been a while since Michael Johnson's been submitted. And you look at Carlos Diego Ferreira and those 3 losses that he's had recently, let's put those into context, okay? Those are against fighters who are seasoned, legitimate, high-end grapplers who Gamrot, Dariush, Gillespie. I mean, can you imagine how things would play out Michael Johnson facing those 3 opponents? Styles make fights, and I know that Michael Johnson has that knockout power, and we've seen to a certain degree this could be replicated. Michael Johnson in the way Poirier was able to dispose of Carlos Diego Ferreira. All the way. Also, you look back at that fight, Ferreira grew his hair out in a similar fashion. I was put on notice when I watched Carlos Diego Ferreira fight OAM. I was in person for that matchup. I believe that was in 2016 or so. And Ferreira is a solid grappler who also the Taisimov matchup really set a tone for what he's capable of. So at 38 years of age, and by the way, there's only a year and 4 months separating these fighters in age. So if folks are talking about 38 years of age versus 36, I did the math. It's a year and 4 months here, and Michael Johnson has much more wear and tear on his body headed into this matchup. I've been hesitant. I haven't pulled the trigger on it, but I'm leaning towards Carlos Diego Ferreira. I know he could potentially get knocked out. And these are fighters who are nearing the end of their professional mixed martial arts careers. I do see this fight likely ending inside the distance, especially if Ferreira gets on top or finds the back of Michael Johnson, which is the thing here, if this was in a larger octagon, I'd be more leaning towards giving Michael Johnson the benefit of the doubt here. And he could walk away with the victory. He could end up knocking Carlos Diego Ferreira out because his hands still look very crisp. And that's something that his quickness is still there, even at 36 years of age with all those fights on his resume. And Ferreira, yes, the injury was a legitimate one against Gamrot. He was out of commission for a while there, and that's a rib injury. Rib injuries tend to keep people on the shelf so they can't run. They can't really do much. And they're just sitting back and recovering. But Ferreira, I was looking on the Instagram, and he's going to have the head coach at Team Fortis, Sayouf, in the corner this time around. And he wasn't there last time around. I believe he had Brahima in his corner. So I'll be picking Carlos Diego Ferreira in this matchup, and I'll be interesting. We've got some comments here. Douglas says that he's on CDF. He thinks he gets the sub, but he sees the hesitation. Yes, I do as well. Movable objects versus stoppable forces. Yes, this was a great matchmaking card. Under 2.5 is your favorite spot. Yeah, I see something like that cashing. Evan, I'm in agreement with you there. Someone is likely being either rendered unconscious or they're tapping. And I don't see Carlos Diego Ferreira tapping to Michael Johnson's submission game, but I do see the real possibility of Carlos Diego Ferreira ending this fight via submission. Is Carlos going to trigger his inner Daniel Pineda? We'll see. We will see. I mean, this is a great fight. I'll be all locked in for this one. You want to talk about a fight that went up on the fridge? This is one of them. So Carlos Diego Ferreira is going to be the pick. I also see him getting this done inside the distance, but there's a real possibility that he gets sparked by Michael Johnson. And this is another situation we have to mention. Be wary of folks who speak in certainties when they break down fights, because there are none, especially with this specific card. Of course, you want to make the picks. You want to be right most of the time, and you want to provide value and insight and knowledge, but also to not give the other side of the fight their due respect. That would be doing yourself a disservice. And in this matchup, Anthony Hernandez, he looks like he's been steamrolling competition. You watch his last fight out against Bariut, was able to slow roast Marc-Andre Bariut, which does not happen often. Almost looked like Bariut was physically breaking during the matchup. And Fluffy Hernandez is taking on Edmund Shahbazyan, who is a prospect and is still only 25 years of age. He's not a finished product. He's changed gyms, and he has tried to start to manage his cardio, but it appears to have come at a cost because he isn't as explosive, and he's keeping some reserve in the tank. Now, is he going to try to do that against Anthony Fluffy Hernandez? Because I need to mention this. I know we have a lot of people watching this breakdown right now, but I want you to go back and watch Fluffy Hernandez get sandblasted by Kevin Holland just a few fights ago. It's amazing how recency bias can change the complexion of everyone's opinion. And I know Fluffy Hernandez is the next best thing here, and he was getting obliterated for most of the fight against Rodolfo Vieira until Vieira ended up completely gassing himself out. So Fluffy's looked solid, but I'm not a believer in Fluffy Hernandez here. If this fight does get extended, yes, I believe that Fluffy Hernandez becomes live, but in the early going, especially the first round and a half to 2 rounds, Shahbazyan should be getting the better of Hernandez on the feet whenever they're at range. And I like that striking, the straight punches, the killer instinct of Shahbazyan. When he connects, you can see the fire in his eyes. He wasn't able to get it done against Brunson, had early success against Jack Hermanson. That's got to be mentioned. So I'm going to be picking the underdog here in Edmund Shahbazyan. I think that this line is a little wide here. And I know that it seems like the world is on Fluffy Hernandez. And I want to see it one more time from Fluffy. I'm not putting money on this fight right now. I have no plays on this fight. I am not a believer in Fluffy Hernandez. And Shahbazyan is a real threat. And he needs to be taken seriously too. That's the other thing. If Fluffy Hernandez treats this like he did the Kevin Holland fight, you talk about discipline inside and out of the octagon. I mean, it seems like he came well prepared for this, or for his last matchup against Barriot. But I have some concerns. And Shahbazyan, at least he left a camp that was where he reached his ceiling at that camp in California, and now moved to Extreme Couture, where he seems to be making some strides. So give me Shahbazyan in this matchup, and it wouldn't surprise me to see him end up winning inside the distance. But Fluffy Hernandez, I see him potentially winning this fight late as well. But I'm going to be picking the underdog here. Next up, we have Mackenzie Dern taking on Angela Hill. Angela Hill plus 135 at the betting window. Mackenzie Dern minus 155. Mackenzie Dern, this line's closing, right? I remember Mackenzie Dern was in the minus 170s. We've watched the pre-fight interviews. We know the trials and tribulations that are happening outside of the octagon for Mackenzie Dern. Angela Hill, 38 years of age. We talked about the Carlos Diego Ferreira fight, that Michael Johnson fight. They're very similar. There's some parallels that closing the distance is going to be a real take-home point here. We need to pay attention to how that's going to happen, because if Carlos Diego Ferreira can't close distance, it may be a long night for him. And if Mackenzie Dern cannot close the distance on Angela Hill, that could be a long night for Mackenzie Dern. 5 rounds against Angela Hill, who cardio seems to be still in check at 38 years of age. It's pretty incredible, the longevity, and also the tread life that Angela Hill has had. She's been in there against Amanda Lemos, Claudia Gadelha. There have been so many others throughout the career, and she's still coming out the other side with victories. And the Emily Ducote fight, we saw she's riding high. The confidence is high. But Mackenzie Dern, I mean, she's a force to be reckoned with if this fight hits the mat. And do I believe it hits the fight? It hits the mat? I think it's going to. And at some point, I think that Dern is going to capitalize here inside the smaller octagon. I think it honestly may come down to Mackenzie Dern just bull rushing Angela Hill. And Angela Hill will likely try to play the matador for as long as she can. But Mackenzie Dern will probably get desperate and force the takedown force a grappling exchange and try to do whatever she can at all costs, whatever it takes, to either pull guard or drag Hill to the mat. And we saw against Jandiroba, there have been other situations where Angela Hill unconventional techniques have caused some challenges for her in fights. And Mackenzie Dern, I know I've heard folks talk about, and I've seen the visual evidence of the 11% takedown accuracy, and that is a major, major concern here. But the fight ending, the potential to end the fight, because I know Dern is extremely tough. You're talking about 25 minutes, and I've seen Marina Rodriguez, we've seen Yan Jiaonan survive, so there have been others who've survived, but at this point in Angela Hill's career, I think that she ends up taking an L here against Mackenzie Dern. I haven't played it yet, and I'm watching this number. I'm watching this line close and close. I'm keeping my eye on it, but I'm going to be picking Mackenzie Dern to win, and just be wary of not being too cute with what you're playing here. Keep an eye on the fight doesn't go the distance line. Keep an eye on the submission line, and also keep an eye on the money line, because if they start to get pretty close, then you have to consider all possibilities. And I know Angela Hill, there's a very low percentage of outcomes that I see where she ends up winning this fight via finish, unless Dern outside of the cage has just been a mess and hasn't kept herself together. But she made weight. She looked solid on the scales, and she looks like she's fired up in that face-off too. I'll be picking Mackenzie Dern, and I think that she does end up winning this fight inside the distance. And want to wish everybody a fantastic fight day. You can check the betmma.tips profile page. I don't have anything up yet, but I'm keeping an eye on a few lines here. And this is one of those cards where if you want to pass, there's no shame in passing on a card. You don't want to force any action. We're up well over 120 units, backed or tracked for many years here. And that was accomplished by being mindful of bankroll management. Remember, you never want to risk too much of your bankroll on a specific card. You want to pick your spots, take one fight at a time, and also be you. That's the other thing. At the end of this, when this all comes to an end, we're all mere mortals, and you, with the passing of Jim Brown yesterday, he's one of those guys who, at times you watch him and it's almost like he was invincible. Same goes for Marvin Hagler. Two of those men, tough as nails, almost seemingly invincible, and their lives came to an end. And let's make the most of what we have here on planet Earth. Remember to go get what's yours, my friends. On that note, and let's do this. So cheers to you on this fight day. Let's go. Let's get after it. Take care.